The Earth we know is a blue marble. It is a world of green forests, vast oceans, and teeming cities. It is a planet defined by life, but this is not the planet we started with. Rewind the clock. Go back past the ice ages, past the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, past the first trees and the first fish. Go back until the map of the world dissolves entirely. You arrive at a time when the Earth was not a home. It was a factory of violence, a sphere of molten rock, screaming through the vacuum of space, bombarded by asteroids and choked by toxic gas. There was no oxygen, no blue sky, no sound, but the roar of volcanoes and the impact of meteors. This is not an alien world. This is our home. 4.6 billion years ago. For nearly 90% of Earth's history, the planet was a place we would not recognize. It was a time of fire, then of global floods, and finally, of crushing ice. It was an era that lasted 4 billion years. We call this massive stretch of deep time the Precambrian. It is the missing majority of our history. And yet, in this forgotten darkness, everything necessary for the modern world was forged. This is the story of how a ball of magma became a living planet. To understand the scale of this era, we must understand the timeline. If the entire history of Earth were compressed into a single 24-hour day, humans would not appear until the last 3 seconds before midnight. The dinosaurs would appear at roughly 10:45 p.m. The Precambrian is everything from midnight until 9 p.m. It is the foundation of the clock itself. It begins 4.6 billion years ago with the Hadean Eon. The name comes from Hades, the Greek underworld, and the description is geologically accurate. The solar system was young and chaotic. Dust and gas orbited the newborn sun, colliding and clumping together through gravity. These collisions generated immense heat. As Earth formed, it wasn't solid rock. It was a roiling ocean of magma, thousands of miles deep. The surface temperature exceeded 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At this stage, Earth had no protection. It had no magnetic field to deflect solar radiation, and no atmosphere to regulate heat. It was a naked, molten sphere, spinning wildly in the dark. Then, a catastrophe occurred that would define our planet's future. A protoplanet roughly the size of Mars, which scientists have named Theia. It struck our planet with a glancing blow. The energy released was incomprehensible, enough to liquefy both worlds instantly. The impact vaporized layers of rock and blasted trillions of tons of debris into orbit. Over millions of years, gravity pulled this debris ring together to form our moon. This collision did more than give us a nightlight. It tilted Earth on its axis, creating the seasons we experience today. It spun the planet faster, and it remixed the chemical composition of the crust. But the Hadean remained a hostile environment. As the magma ocean slowly cooled, a crust of black basalt formed, only to be torn apart again by volcanoes. The atmosphere was a heavy, suffocating blanket of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. But this vapor held a promise. As the bombardment of asteroids slowed and the surface heat radiated away into space, the temperature finally dropped below the boiling point of water. The stage was set for the longest storm in history. We do not know exactly when the rain started, but evidence suggests it was around 4.4 billion years ago. Clouds of steam that had wrapped the planet for eons began to condense. The first drop fell on cooling lava, then another. Then, the skies opened up. This was not a normal rainstorm. It was a global deluge that lasted for millions, perhaps tens of millions, of years. The water poured down in torrents, filling the low-lying basins and impact craters. It is difficult to visualize the scale of this event. The water that fills our oceans today, all 300 million cubic miles of it, fell from the sky during this period. By the time the clouds cleared, Earth was a water world. Small volcanic islands poked through the surface, but there were no continents, as we know them. This primeval ocean was not the blue paradise we see in travel brochures. It was a chemical soup. The water was likely scalding hot, heated by the fresh crust beneath. It was acidic, and it looked different because there was no free oxygen to react with minerals. The ocean was filled with dissolved iron. This likely gave the water a deep green or black color. The sky above was not blue, but a hazy orange or pink, the result of high concentrations of methane and carbon dioxide scattering the sunlight. A green ocean beneath an orange sky. This was the laboratory where the most important chemical reaction in the universe was about to take place. We now enter the Archean Eon. The planet was cooler, wet, and stable. But it was dead. The mystery of how non-living matter became living cells, abiogenesis, remains one of science's greatest puzzles. However, we have strong evidence of where it happened. It likely did not happen in a calm tide pool, but in the most violent environment possible, the bottom of the ocean, deep underwater, along volcanic fissures. Hydrothermal vents blasted jets of superheated, mineral-rich water into the cold ocean. These distinct structures acted as natural chemical reactors. The porous rock provided tiny chambers, where molecules could become trapped and concentrated. Heat provided the energy. The vents provided the chemicals, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen. Over hundreds of millions of years, complex molecules began to assemble. Amino acids formed. Then, lipids formed bubbles. Finally, a molecule appeared that could do something no other chemical could do. It could copy itself. Whether this was RNA or a precursor, it was the spark. Around 3.8 and 4 billion years ago, the first single-celled organisms emerged. These were prokaryotes, simple, microscopic sacs of fluid containing genetic code. They had no nucleus, no complex machinery. They were inefficient and slow. They lived in the dark, feeding on chemical gradients and sulfur spewing from the Earth's crust. For over 1 billion years, this was life on Earth, a layer of slime on rocks, a microscopic film in the water. If you were a time traveler standing on a volcanic beach during the Archean Eon, the silence would be deafening. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees, just the sound of waves and the hiss of steam. But in the shallow waters, something was evolving. A new type of bacteria was about to accidentally invent a weapon of mass destruction. around 2.7 billion years ago. A specific type of microbe called cyanobacteria developed a biological superpower. Until this point, life relied on scavenging chemicals for energy. Cyanobacteria found a better source: the sun. They developed photosynthesis. They could take sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide and convert them into sugar for food. But this process had a waste product, a gas that was highly reactive and dangerous to the chemistry of the early Earth: oxygen. For hundreds of millions of years, the cyanobacteria pumped this waste product into the water. At first, the planet had a defense mechanism. The oceans were so full of dissolved iron that the oxygen immediately reacted with it. The iron rusted and fell to the seafloor. This process created massive layers of iron oxide that we see today in geological strata, the banded iron formations. These red and gray bands of rock are the source of most of the iron ore used in human civilization today. Your car, your fridge, and the steel beams of skyscrapers are made from the rusted remains of the Archean oceans. But eventually, the iron ran out. The oceans could not absorb any more oxygen. The gas began to bubble out of the water and into the atmosphere. This triggered the Great Oxidation Event. For us, oxygen is life. For the microbes of the early Earth, it was a holocaust. Oxygen is a corrosive element. It burns molecular bonds. The anaerobic bacteria that dominated the planet were not built to handle it. Their cell walls degraded. Their metabolic pathways collapsed. As oxygen levels rose, it triggered the greatest extinction event in the history of biology. Nearly all life on Earth died. The survivors were forced to retreat into mud, deep water, or other oxygen-free environments, where their descendants still hide today. But the chaos wasn't over. The oxygen reacted with methane in the atmosphere. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas that had been keeping the Earth warm. When the oxygen scrubbed the methane out of the skies, the planet's temperature crashed. The Earth plunged into a deep freeze. This was the Huronian glaciation, a global ice age, triggered by microscopic bacteria. However, this disaster laid the groundwork for the future. High in the atmosphere, solar radiation struck the oxygen molecules and converted them into ozone. A protective layer began to form, a shield against ultraviolet radiation that would eventually allow life to leave the ocean. Fast forward to the Proterozoic Eon. The Earth had stabilized, oxygen levels were higher, but the climate system remained volatile. Around 700 million years ago, the planet entered a period of extreme instability, known as the Cryogenian period. Geological evidence suggests that ice sheets spread from the poles all the way to the equator. The entire planet was encased in a shell of ice, up to a mile thick. From space, Earth would have looked like a smooth, white billiard ball. We call this the Snowball Earth hypothesis. The physics of this freeze is terrifying. Ice reflects sunlight. The more ice formed, the more solar heat was reflected back into space, making the planet colder, which created even more ice. It was a runaway feedback loop. Beneath this frozen shell, the oceans became dark and stagnant. Photosynthesis shut down in most areas because sunlight could not penetrate the ice. The food web collapsed. Life, which had been slowly advancing, was once again pushed to the brink of annihilation. Organisms survived only in small pockets, perhaps in slushy areas near the equator or huddled around the warmth of deep-sea volcanoes. This deep freeze lasted for millions of years. It seemed like the end of the story. But Earth has a beating heart. Plate tectonics did not stop just because the surface was frozen. Beneath the ice, volcanoes continued to erupt. Usually, rain washes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But on a frozen world, there is no rain. There is no liquid water to dissolve the gas. So, the carbon dioxide from the volcanoes began to build up. Concentrations of CO2 skyrocketed, trapping heat. Finally, the greenhouse effect overwhelmed the ice. The melt was catastrophic. The planet swung from a freezer to a sauna in a geological blink of an eye. The melting ice released massive amounts of nutrients into the oceans. The water was flooded with phosphates and other minerals. The survivors of the Snowball Earth woke up to a world that was warm, rich in oxygen, and full of food. Evolution was about to hit the accelerator. To understand what happened next, we must look at the cell itself. For billions of years, life was microscopic and simple. Bacteria are solitary creatures. They do not build bodies. They do not build tissues. But roughly 1.5 to 2 billion years ago, before the Great Snowball Events, a biological accident occurred that changed the rules. One large single-celled organism engulfed a smaller bacterium. Usually, the large cell would digest the small one, but this time, the digestion failed. The small bacterium survived inside the larger one. Instead of fighting, they began to trade. The small bacterium was efficient at using oxygen to create energy. It became a power plant for the host. In exchange, the host provided protection and food. This partnership is called endosymbiosis. The internal bacteria evolved into mitochondria, the energy generators that power every cell in your body. Today, a similar accident happened later with cyanobacteria, which were swallowed and became chloroplasts, the green solar panels inside plant cells. This created the eukaryotic cell. These cells were larger, more complex, and packed with energy. Unlike bacteria, they could specialize. They could work together. This was the prerequisite. For multicellular life, you cannot build a tree or a dinosaur out of bacteria. You need complex cells with dedicated power plants. As the glaciers of the Snowball Earth retreated, these complex cells began to experiment. They started clumping together, not just in colonies, but as unified organisms. We have arrived at 600 million years ago, the Ediacaran period. The waters were warm and shallow, and for the first time, if you looked at the seafloor, you would see things you could identify as animals. But they were unlike anything alive today. This was the Ediacaran biota, nature's first draft of multicellular life. These creatures were soft-bodied and strange. Fossils like Dickinsonia look like quilted bath mats, moving slowly across the sand. Others, like Charnia, looked like fern fronds anchored to the muddy bottom, swaying in the current. They had no eyes, no mouths, no digestive tracts, no legs. They were fractal organisms, repeating patterns of tissue that absorbed nutrients directly from the water through their skin. It was a garden of Ediacaran, a peaceful world. There were no predators, nothing had teeth, nothing had claws. These creatures did not need to run or hide. They simply existed, absorbing the rich soup of the post-glacial ocean. However, this design was flawed. As efficient as they were at sitting and absorbing, they were evolutionary dead ends. They represented a way of life that was about to become obsolete. The peace of the Ediacaran was not meant to last. A new biological innovation was emerging, one that would change the ocean from a garden into a battlefield. The evidence for the end of the Precambrian is not found in a body fossil, but in a trace fossil, in rocks dating to around 540 million years ago. We see the first burrows, small tunnels, dug into the seafloor sediment. This seems insignificant, but it implies something profound. To burrow, an animal needs muscles. It needs a front and a back. It needs a distinct head. And most importantly, it is looking for something. These were the first motile animals, likely worm-like creatures, that actively hunted for food. This behavioral shift marked the end of the Ediacaran. The soft, immobile mats of the previous era were defenseless against creatures that could move and eat. The peaceful garden was consumed. The chemistry of the ocean had finally reached a tipping point. Oxygen levels were high enough to support active, high-energy metabolisms. Calcium carbonate was available to build shells and skeletons. The stage was set for the Cambrian Explosion. In a geological instant, life would explode into diversity. Eyes, teeth, legs, armor, and spines would appear. The ancestors of arthropods, mollusks, and vertebrates would conquer the ocean. But that is a story for another era. The long prelude was over. When we look at the history of the Earth, we often skip the Precambrian. We treat it as a prologue, a blank page, before the real story begins. But that is a mistake. The Precambrian is the story. It was in this era that the planet itself was built. The continents you stand on were formed by Precambrian tectonics. The water you drink fell as Precambrian rain. The oxygen you breathe was manufactured by Precambrian bacteria. Every biological mechanism that keeps you alive today was invented in the dark oceans of this lost time. Your cells are powered by the descendants of captured bacteria. Your DNA is a code written in the Archean deep. The Precambrian was a 4 billion year crucible. It was a time of unimaginable violence and extreme patience. It broke the planet and rebuilt it again and again until it was ready. We are not separate from this deep past. We are the direct result of it. When you look up at the moon, remember the collision that formed it. When you take a breath, remember the microbes that poisoned the sky to make it blue. The Precambrian is not just ancient history. It is the foundation of everything that is, and everything that ever will be.